end zone. Underthrown, touchdown! Trey Tucker! To the end zone it goes! Caught! Touchdown, Armon
Bearcat Blitz on the Believe Network. How we doing, everybody? I'm your host, Russ Heltman. Bringing in my co-host, Neil Meyer, in just a second. We are presented by FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook. And folks, they are loaded up with profit boosts this weekend across the college football slate. They got the Boostin' with the Boys, 50% profit boost. 50% profit boost on the Oregon-Penn State matchup. 50% profit boost on the Alabama-Georgia matchup. You can get much better value compared to normal betting lines by using these 50% profit boosts on your wagers, and compared to other lines at other sports books, you're going to be getting about a 50% better value compared to the market when you pick FanDuel Sportsbook for your college football wagers this weekend. You can use that Boostin' with the Boys 50% profit boost on Cincinnati to upset the Kansas Jayhawks. That line sitting at right around, let's see if I can pull it up here real quick. I think it's at 4.5. 5.5 now. Cincinnati 8. -115 VIG, +5.5 underdog, or you can bet them straight up on the money line to win the game at +160 in a game that's expected to have some points, and over under of 57.5 for this contest. We'll touch on that on today's show. We'll get to the first injury report ever released by the Cincinnati Bearcats football program ahead of a conference matchup. And we also have the schedule release for the Cincinnati Bearcats basketball team. We'll touch on that before we preview and predict the matchup on Saturday at noon between Cincinnati football and the Kansas Jayhawks. All that coming up on Bearcat Blitz after these messages. Getting into the show now, bringing in Neil, my co-host. And Neil, we had the first injury report released for the Cincinnati Bearcats football team. Pretty much exactly what we expected. No major contributors on the list besides Dante Corleone. Among the guys that are out, they're basically all players that have been out the entire season already. They've been out for months at this point, and most of them are confirmed to have already been out, and nothing out of the ordinary to see them listed as out on this report. We got Manny Covey and Gavin Grover added to the list of questionable players along with Dante Corleone. Now, they don't put actual injuries associated with these questionable tags on here, but we do know Dante is dealing with an ankle issue, and then Manny Covey and Gavin Grover are dealing with undisclosed issues. That is on the Cincinnati side, Neil. Just Dante Corleone really to take note of. And then on the Kansas side, obviously safety Devin Dye is going to be out for the first half of this game. That's a rough situation for their secondary and a rough situation for their backfield. Daniel Hishaw Jr. would be pretty much shocking to see him suit up in this game, Neil. The top running back for the Kansas Jayhawks. He went down in the 41-10 victory over West Virginia this past weekend, and he is listed as doubtful on the Kansas injury report. All in all, pretty much what we expected, Neil. And before I give the floor to you, I don't know if you agree with me, but from what we saw to Dante on Tuesday's practice, I would be pretty shocked if he suited up this weekend.
Yeah, I'm right there with you too, Russ. After seeing what we saw at practice on Tuesday, it looks like it could be trickling down to not 100% ready for Saturday. Maybe they give him the extra week. Who knows? But Scott Satterfield was adamant that Dante was going to be listed as questionable before this injury report even came out. So that was no surprise to see, as it is. It looks to be an ankle injury that Dante's dealing with. So overall, not really surprised to see him listed as questionable. We heard that all along, but Gavin Grover and Manny Covey both popping up on that list. Obviously, Grover's your second or third string tight end, depending what packages and schemes you look at. And Manny Covey is a guy who impacts the game in the special teams aspect and also there as your third running back as well. So going to be interesting to see what kind of limitations those guys have going forward. So it's also too worth noting, Russ, that these injury reports, right? They are updated daily from Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, leading up into game time. So tonight's injury report comes out at 10 p.m. It could look a little different than what the one looked like last night. Now, I'm not saying it's going to look much different, but it could still look, some things could shake out to where you might be able to see some things get moved around in different statuses heading into Saturday. But like you mentioned, Daniel Hishaw, I think that's the biggest takeaway when you look at this injury report, Russ, especially on the Kansas side of the ball, right? Everybody knows they like to run the football. And when you're heading into a Big 12 matchup with Kansas, I mean, Lance Leopold even said it himself in his weekly press conference that this Cincinnati team is arguably the best team they have played all season. And that's a huge testament to what Scott Satterfield and the staff is doing because Kansas just came off a non-conference slate where they played Missouri and they played a very close game. So overall, to hear Lance Leopold giving high praise to the Bearcats, saying they're going to be the best team that they have faced thus far, that's huge. And Kansas is going to have to do it now without arguably their leading rusher in Daniel Hishaw. So overall, I don't think we see him suit up on Sunday or on Saturday, but it's also going to be interesting to see what will Kansas do now without their leading rusher and with Dante Corleone's status in jeopardy. Does Kansas rely on LaShawn Williams? Do they rely on Jalen Daniels in the run game? It's going to be a high-scoring game. I think everybody knows that. But now Kansas is going to probably lean more heavily into the run game, and they're probably going to ask Jalen Daniels to do a little bit more than usual. So overall, a lot of stuff to take away from the injury report as well, but it's still positive to see Dante out there on the field. I know, Russ, when we looked at Dante Corleone for that Northwestern State game, nobody really kind of knew the severity of the injury. I mean, we saw him on a scooter, not doing any activity, but we were able to see him out doing some kind of activity on Tuesday. It wasn't what we expected it to be, but to see him up moving around like he was on Tuesday was a positive sign as well.
Yeah, I don't know, Neil, if they're going to be leaning into the rushing attack given the matchup that is favoring Kansas heavily in this game, considering the back end of the Cincinnati Bearcats pass defense and how electric Jalen Daniels has been as a passer this year. I would be a little shocked if they lose Daniel Hishaw and then lean more into the run game. But we will dive into that in due time. Flipping to the hardwood for Cincinnati here. They have released, the Big 12 has all of the teams, these schedules, full 31 game schedules for Cincinnati Bearcats basketball and their Big 12 opponents. You got the 13 non-con and back to 18 conference games, Neil. They have a built-in bye week this time around. Don't have to worry about getting overtaxed like almost, I would say, every one of these Big 12 teams was last year, having to play 20 games straight with no off weeks in between the end of the non-conference and the start of the Big 12 tournament. Some games that stand out to me, Neil. Obviously, you have the first thing I look at on the schedule is how many times and when is Cincinnati going to be traveling across two time zones and going from one time zone in the east all the way out west and moving three time zones in that sense. They only really have to do that one time, Neil. Really, really good scheduling once again by the Big 12 powers that be. They're going to Arizona and Arizona State on January 21st. They'll, I imagine, stay there through the middle of that week and be ready to go for the Arizona State matchup in Tempe, Arizona, just a little bit away from Tucson. So that's the big kind of marker I was looking for. How many times does Cincinnati have to travel all the way out west to the Arizona, Utah side of things? And Neil, that's really the only time they have to go out there. This is a pretty palatable travel schedule for the Cincinnati Bearcats. And when you think about the other road matchups they have, you got Orlando and Morgantown, your two rivals, kind of close to you in the region. Don't have to cross time zones there. You do have to go to Houston, so that's a normal one though. They've almost always played Houston on the road throughout the regular season. And then Texas Tech and TCU stick out to me, plus Kansas as your road matchup. So travel-wise, Neil, my big takeaway here is not that taxing on this Cincinnati Bearcats team. And on top of that, I mentioned in the Bearcats group chat we were in yesterday, it may be a negative to have your bye week between the February 15th date and the February 16th or 21st date between those games against Utah and Kansas. But I'm kind of flipping to the other side. I think it's better to have that bye week right before the end of the conference slate because you kind of break up the non-con. You get a little bit of a break there. You got to kind of have that holiday break mixed into the non-con schedule. You get the full conference slate, and then you get a break between your kind of bulk meat of your conference slate and the postseason. So I kind of love how this schedule kind of date wise and not analytic wise, but just judiciously wise, the way that they've scheduled things out, the way they've actually placed the game dates, it's set up pretty well for Cincinnati.
Yeah, most certainly, Russ. And when you look down at the schedule, like you mentioned, they only really have to go out west only one time this season to where they're traveling across multiple time zones. And it's a credit to the Big 12, Commissioner Yormark, and what this staff and what this conference is doing. They're making it easy on Cincinnati, right? When you're traveling across three time zones to an Arizona, you might as well add your Arizona State right behind it or vice versa. And they're doing a great job at making that so it limits that kind of travel back and forth compared to, hey, let's go out to Arizona in middle of January and then go back out to Tempe per se late February in that aspect. So it's good to see that they have those back-to-back games. I do like that. Some other notable games on the schedule. Dan Skilling's return to Fifth Third Arena, January 28th. That will be a big game. You also have Mustafa Shams return back to UCF on January 11th. So there's a lot to take away, Russ. But the one thing I wish was a little bit differently for this matchup, and I was talking to a UC school spokesperson about this and giving our thoughts back and forth off the record, was it sucks to see Houston as your Big 12 opener on January 3rd. And the reason that being is, yes, that matchup is a great matchup. Kelvin Sampson will bring arguably one of the best teams in the country to Fifth Third Arena. But the reason I think it sucks in that aspect was the timing of it. Students are still going to be on fall break. The semester doesn't start until around that January 12th mark. So when you have a Big 12 matchup with a team like Houston, you wish you would have your students back on campus. But I'm sure there's going to be 13,000 fans in Fifth Third Arena for that night. But when those matchups come, they do hit a little bit different when you have all your students there as well. But overall, Russ, you look down at the schedule. I'm actually very, very happy with how this schedule played out for Cincinnati. I mean, you look down, I think the bye week, like you mentioned, I think having a bye week for Cincinnati is crucial heading into following the Utah match and then getting that week off before heading into Kansas. And the reason that said being is, for me, Kansas is going to be a top 25 team. Texas Tech also going to be probably a top 25 team. And then you get an Oklahoma State team who's been struggling for the last few years. But then you arguably get just enough rest or whatnot to come in and you get to prepare, where fans should be happy about this one. They get to see AJ DeBansta and Kevin Young and this BYU squad at Fifth Third Arena on March 3rd. And at that point, Russ, not sure what to really expect with this team yet, but that could be an opportunity for Cincinnati to get a huge quad one win heading into potential conference tournament play and March Madness if they are in position to get back to the big dance for the first time in what seems to be since 2018, 2019, so almost 7 years. So that game will be one that a lot of people will have circled on their list. Obviously, AJ DeBansta, all the hype surrounding him, the number one overall prospect. It's going to be interesting. That's going to be a matchup to watch as well.
Kansas, Texas Tech, Oklahoma State, BYU, TCU to close. You could have, I mean, Neil, those could be 3 top 10 opponents in Kansas, Texas Tech, and BYU by that point of the season.
And that Kansas game, it's at Fog Allen, which, Russ, I know you didn't make the trip out to Fog Allen last year, but I will indeed be planning to make the trip back there again this year just because of the historic venue and whatnot. And I think Cincinnati, if all things go well, could have a good opportunity there to get another big win versus Kansas. So That's going to be a fun one to match up. And I'm not sure if you're going to go travel to any road games, but there's a lot of pleasing opportunities
Can
on
almost
this
guarantee I will
schedule.
not be unless the travel is paid for, which it is currently not being paid for, so I will not be there.
So overall, a lot of big opportunities for not only the Bearcats, but Bearcats fans to get out there and kind of support these guys. And arguably, Russ, I think this schedule is probably the best they've had in recent years.
Yeah, and I unfortunately will not be at the Xavier matchup this year because I am in a wedding that weekend. So duty calls on that front. But it's going to be a fun year of college basketball. Hopefully for Cincinnati, knock on wood, they could stay healthy. You don't have an immediate injury to a key player like they had in game one last year. Cincinnati football dealing with that same aspect early on this year. Cincinnati Bengals football dealing. I mean, it's just injuries rock Cincinnati sports. It feels like every single year. Hopefully, this time around, the injury bug can stay far away from biting the Bearcats basketball squad. Let's take a quick break, and then we will get into a preview of the Kansas matchup against Cincinnati Bearcats football on Saturday, which you can bet on right now on FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook. Cincinnati a 5.5 point underdog and plus 160 on the money line. And you can add that to your 50% profit boost token and get that money line wager up above 2-1 odds on the payout. Just go to 5.5 point spread for Cincinnati Bearcats football. Just go to FanDuel Sportsbook and sign up there if you have not already, or if you're already a FanDuel Sportsbook user. Tap into that 50% profit boost from Boosting with the Boys and see if you would like to try your hand at a wager on the Cincinnati Bearcats to upset the Kansas Jayhawks. All that analysis coming up after these messages on Bearcat Blitz presented by FanDuel Sportsbook. Kansas Jayhawks, Neil, welcoming in Brendan Sorsby and the Cincinnati Bearcats football team for a noon matchup, 11 a.m. local time. So an early wake up for the men at Kansas at David Booth Kansas Memorial Stadium. Weather expected to be beautiful, partly cloudy, 70 degrees, shouldn't be much wind. And Neil, it's perfectly set up for some scoring here, especially if Dante Corleone does not play in this game. I expect there to be points aplenty in this one, as do the odds makers, setting that total at about 57.5 points right now. Kansas, as we mentioned, is hovering between a 5.5 to a 4.5 point favorite, whichever sports book you frequent, and 69% chance, 69.2% chance on the ESPN Football Power Index matchup predictor to take out the Cincinnati Bearcats. Cincinnati checking in at number 46 nationally on the ESPN FPI entering this game, and Kansas at number 27. Neil, what are you looking for on offense? What are you kind of keying in for? What is your prediction for this game as Cincinnati tries to go for another upset and not be 0-2 on that front in this 2025 season?
Yeah, safe to say, Russ, what I'm looking for is something you actually discussed with fellow offensive lineman Joe Cotton this week. Can they keep Brendan Sorsby protected and upright? This
Yeah.
Kansas team loves to get after the quarterback. Cincinnati's offensive line has done a great job at protecting Brendan Sorsby for the first 3 weeks of the season, but Kansas has allowed 12 sacks on the season, or Kansas has recorded 12 sacks on the season. They're going to have their hands full on Saturday. This offensive line group will. So it's going to be interesting. Can they protect Brendan Sorsby? And if they are able to do that, Russ, this could be a high scoring, high volume kind of day for not only Cincinnati's offense, but I'm expecting to see some points put up on the board across both teams here. But the big takeaway for me is on the offensive side of the ball is you have to find a way to protect Brendan Sorsby and keep him upright. If you are able to do that and allow him to have some time back there in the pocket, really go through all of his reads, and then if something's not there, if they allow him to use his legs in the run game as well, that's crucial. But for me, it all starts with the trenches up front. If that offensive line is able to hold their own ground in the trenches and win that battle, maybe get the run game going. That's what a lot of Cincinnati fans are expecting to see. If Cincinnati can win the battle of trenches and win the line of scrimmage, I believe they come away with a victory in this game.
It's not going to be easy. Not
It
going to
won't
be
it won't be
easy.
easy.
I mean, Kansas is one of the most efficient teams in the country entering this game. They are an absolute wagon. Great performances so far this season. 3-1. Obviously, have the loss at Missouri, but gave up just 14 total points or 24 total points to West Virginia Wagner and Fresno State. This is a gnarly defense. And Neil, I don't know that Cincinnati is going to be able to consistently run the football, especially with how inconsistently the running backs have attacked holes so far this season. They can't be hesitant in this game at all because Kansas, according to CFB graphs from Parker Stats of War, Parker Fleming, number one defense in the country, Kansas is in EPA per rush allowed. They are the most efficient defense in the nation at shutting down your rushing attack. They know that Cincinnati is going to see that and going to want to pass the ball, and they're going to get it after the quarterback as well. Top 12 nationally in sacks with 13 so far this season. Obviously, you mentioned Cincinnati has not allowed a sack so far this year. Only team in the country to not allow a sack so far through week 4 of the 2025 college football season. So you got a Cincinnati team that it's ranked 70th in EPA per dropback, going up against the Kansas defense that's 69th in EPA per dropback. Can Brendan Sorsby carry over the strong passing play from the past 2 games into this matchup? Can he do it against a power conference secondary? That's the big question and the big answer we're going to get on Saturday. I think the offensive line should be able to hold up. I imagine they're going to give up a sack. I imagine they're going to give up more pressures than we're used to seeing over the first 3 games. But all in all, I think they'll do enough to keep Brendan Sorsby upright. Can Brendan Sorsby execute and consistently hit his accuracy marks against a average? They're perfectly average defense in the Kansas Jayhawks. That's the big question for me. And then on the other side of the ball, this secondary, Neil, can they hold up? Can the Bearcats hold up? Can they create some turnovers out of this secondary? They got the first one against Northwestern State, but I think they only had 1 turnover in that game, right, Neil? I
Yep.
believe. Yeah. So there's only
Mhm.
been 1 turnover forced so far this season by the defense. If they only, I think it's going to take 2 turnovers to win this game at least for Cincinnati to pull the road upset. And it's just not a great matchup at all for the secondary, Neil. Number 1 drop back EPA in the country for Kansas so far. They've been the most efficient drop back team in the nation. Jalen Daniels has been electric as a passer. 6 of 99 for 12 touchdowns, 2 interceptions so far, 817 yards passing. He has been dynamic all the way around. He's basically just been at a higher level, a little bit higher level, and a similar kind of playing style to Brendan Sorsby this year. So Cincinnati's secondary, they're gonna have to hold up, and I think they're gonna have to force a turnover to be able to cover the spread, in my opinion, and they're gonna have to force multiple turnovers to be able to win this football game. 102nd in EPA per dropback allowed is Cincinnati's defense so far this year. They have also given up not great yards per attempt in terms of like really high numbers from the offense, and they've not given up a ton of yards per game, Neil, passing wise, but they've given up a lot of first downs. They're giving up a lot of efficiency to opposing passers, as we mentioned, with the completion percentages allowed in the past few games up near 80% for Nebraska and Bowling Green. And when you look at the passing defense in general and their quarterback rating allowed this year, Cincinnati is 88th nationally, allowing 134.93 quarterback rating. Got to keep Jalen Daniels under a 140 rating here. Probably got to keep him under 120 rating to have a realistic shot at pulling off this upset. So to me, the matchup issues are just a little too much to overcome, on top of the fact that I don't imagine Dante Corleone will be out there, given what we saw from him on Tuesday and him not really being involved at much at all of practice. So I'm going with the Jayhawks here, Neil, in a high-scoring affair, 37-34. They get the job done over the Bearcats, who end up covering once again as an underdog, but do not get the victory. What is your score prediction?
Man, I like how we are always like thinking very similar
Were you
scores.
right around that number too?
I was going to
We
go
do not compare
34.
this at all before, Neil, for people that don't that
I'm
want
going to
to
go
look behind the curtain.
I'm going to go 34-31, and I'm going to go with the Bearcats in this one. I think
All
it
right.
comes down to the battle of the trenches here, but I think Cincinnati knows what's at stake. I like the fact that they've had 10 days or so roughly to get right after the bye week. But for me, I think for Saturday, there's a couple reasons why I'm saying this. Saturday, Scott Satterfield was coaching with a bigger purpose. After the death of one of his close friends, and Sean Clark, who he
So sad.
spent a lot of time with him at App State. And you heard him in his press conference. He even said, like, Sean would want me to go out there and compete and get these guys ready. So I think Saturday is going to be a much bigger focus for the Bearcats and Scott Satterfield. And if this team's able to do it and rally behind him, dealing with the loss of a close friend like that in a tragic moment, I think that's going to be huge. And I think this kind of week has been, hey, let's get right and let's go out here and play this game. I want to play this game for a close friend. And anytime that happens, it usually weighs a little bit more. So obviously, there's a lot more on the plate of Scott Satterfield this week. But on top of it, I think the Bearcats offense is ready for a challenge, right? We saw what they were able to do. They weren't able to do much versus Nebraska, but I think arguably now that you had 2.5 weeks to tune up some things versus smaller FCS opponents, I think they're ready to take that next step and get another challenge versus a Big 12 foe in Kansas. So I'm going 34-31 in favor of the Bearcats, and I'm going to predict Steven Rusnak buries home a 47-yard field goal in the final seconds of this game.
There you go. And Cincinnati, I believe, Neil, that would be tied for the second highest point total if they can hit 34 points this week of the Scott Satterfield era, right? Because they hit what 41 against Texas Tech, and then they had the 34-0 blowout against Houston, and that would be right there along with those numbers. For Neil Meyer, I'm Russ Heltman. This has been Bearcat Blitz on the Believe Sports Network, and we are presented by FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook. Enjoy the weekend, everybody. Mark those calendars for the Bearcats basketball action, and we'll talk to you reacting to the Kansas matchup early next week.